Good morning, everybody. Dr. Heldman here. Hey, it's December 1st. Yay, we're just about ready to close out this year. In this video, I want to talk to you about whether or not the Nephilim made it through the Great Flood and they showed up on the earth after the flood. I believe that is the case, and I'd like to present some evidence for you to consider regarding that. So let's get started. This is very interesting, and it's leading us down another road as well. So the question is this: was there a second incursion of the Nephilim after the Great Flood? I believe that indeed there was, and so I want to look at the scriptures. The Old Testament is full of scriptures dealing with this. Let's go take a look and see what we can find regarding this topic. Now, this is our baseline scripture. This is Genesis 6:4. There were giants on the earth in those days, and then we have this phrase here, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. This comes out of Genesis 6:4. And the key phrase here is, and also afterward. And if you're like me, and you like getting into exegesis and digging down into this, this is definitely a phrase that you would want to exegete and find out what the heck it's talking about. So here's the scripture. I'm using the New King James Version to do this work. That's the one that I prefer to go to. It doesn't have as much of the Old English as the King James Version, but it stays relatively close to it, and I like to stay as close to King James as I can, but I do consult other versions, so other versions aren't out of base for me, but I normally use the New King James Version to look at Scripture. Let's take a look at this. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Tools, Interlinear here. And I love this new bar they've put across here. This is really cool. And so what we're looking for is we're looking for the phrase giants. And there it is right there. There's Nephilim. And of course, when you highlight it, it shows up right here. So that is the word Nephilim in Hebrew. But the word in Greek, if I scroll down here, I'm going to come to the LXX right here. And this is a fairly big verse, so it's down at the bottom. And here we go. There's the word gigantes, or gigantes, and if you look over here, you can see that it is masculine and it is a plural. So this is the word for giants in the Septuagint, and the word is gigantes. Now let's go also find in Genesis 6:4 and also afterward. It starts here, and it uses the word gam, but we're going to add the and on here. So this little wa here just means and. So it's wagam, ahar, or achar, and then ken. Wagam, achar, ken, and this means also after that. Let's go down into the Septuagint and look at it and see what it says down there. So then when we're looking in the Greek here, and we're looking for also after that, we find this phrase here, ke met akino, and that is the Greek for that. Now this has some interesting properties to it, in that meta here is a word that is used as a way of showing that things happened immediately after or shortly thereafter. And so this is something that we might want to take a look at here. This is the accusative, it's singular, and what it means is that when it follows meta, meta here is a preposition, and so when it follows meta, it's going to happen very quickly. This is an accusative, meaning it's going to happen really quickly or very shortly, and then it will happen. So that's the point with this kai meta akino, and then that is the Greek Septuagint version of what's going on here in Genesis 6:4. So in the Greek, what we're looking at is this ke met akino. The word meta is a Greek preposition, and it means after when followed by a word in the accusative case. So the point here is that meta is saying, okay, there's a word following here, it's in the accusative case, and it means that this comes after, is what that's saying. Thus the word akino, that, is in the accusative case because meta requires it. So the phrase just tells us that what comes next happened after the events previously mentioned. That does not necessarily tell us that there were Nephilim on the earth after the great flood, but it leads us down there fairly effectively. It gives us at least food for thought. You should be aware that there are 3 groups of giants. It wasn't just one. This comes out of Jubilees, the book of Jubilees, 7:22. It says, "And they begot the sons, the Nephilim. They were all unlike, and they devoured one another, and the giants slew the Nephil," those are the Nephilim, "and the Nephil slew the Eljo, and the Eljo mankind." Now they're called, Nephil means Nephilim, and you will read this word Eljo as the Eliud. Now we've all heard the word disembodied spirits. That's been something that we've heard a long, long time, all of our lives. And the reality is that the giants became disembodied spirits upon their death. Because the giants were born from an unholy tryst between angelic beings and human women, God would not permit them to enter heaven. In Greek, they were called the ponerophimata, and the fu there is sort of a breathy type of look. This is where we're getting the word ghost from, meaning wicked spirits. Fumata, or spirit, ghost-like. They would become the Rephaim. Now, the Rephaim are used twice, so it's important to understand that there was a sort of a group of Nephilim who were called the Rephaim, and they consisted of 3 or 4 different camps, and then upon their death, they became the Rephaim, which means evil spirits. So the word is actually used twice there, and so I point that out to you. Now let's look at 1 Enoch, because this is where we're getting this information from. "And now the giants, who are produced from the spirits in flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling." So these Rephaim are still dwelling here. They are disembodied spirits. They want to embody a human, and I would argue that they're probably pretty good at it. The spirits have proceeded from their bodies. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies. The giants, because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin, they shall be evil spirits on the earth, and evil spirits they shall be called. As for the spirits of heaven, in heaven shall be their dwelling, but as for the spirits on the earth, which are born upon the earth, and the earth shall be their dwelling. And the spirits of the giants, they afflict, they oppress, they destroy, they attack, they do battle, they work destruction on the earth, and they cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. So it's important that we understand when we hear the word Rephaim, there were groups of giants on the earth that were still alive, and they were called the Rephaim. We'll see that in Scripture here in a minute. But also, when they became disembodied spirits, they were called the Rephaim as well. Now, how do we know when we're looking at the Scriptures and we see the word Rephaim, and we know that it's talking about a group of living giants, how do we know that the word Rephaim also talks about spiritual, the disembodied spirits? Well, there's a couple of places where you can go and see this. So Isaiah 26:14 says, "They are dead, they will not live, they are deceased." That word deceased is Rephaim. "They will not rise, therefore you have punished and destroyed them and made all their memory to perish." Also, we see this in Isaiah 26:19, "Your dead shall live together with my dead body, they shall arise, awake and sing, you who dwell in the dust. For your dew is like the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead," and that word dead is Rephaim. Now the word "your dead" there in verse 19, the word for death in Hebrew is mot, M-O-T, and so this is a different word here. This word dead here is mot. This word here, dead, is Rephaim. Personally, I think Genesis 6:4 is clearly telling us giants were on the earth both before and after the flood. Now, there may be at least one hint, we'll get to that, indicating that when the next incursion of giants began on the earth, but the Old Testament is full of references to these giants. So let's take a look at some of the scriptures and see what we have here. First of all, we need to talk about the Amorites. And one of the things that you'll find as you begin going down the road and studying these things, there are a variety of scholars who are not necessarily Christian scholars or believers at all, but they love studying back in the day, these old people groups. And so we have secular scholars who say that the Amorites were ancient Northwest Semitic-speaking Bronze Age people who emerged from Western Mesopotamia. And we know from Scripture that they were on the earth after the flood because they were descendants of Canaan. And here's your working Scripture. This is Genesis 10, 15, 16. Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and then the Jebusite, the Amorite, and the Girgashite. And I also give you 1 Chronicles 1, 13 through 14 to substantiate that a little bit more. Now that doesn't really clearly tell you that the Amorites were Nephilim, does it? So let's see if we can find out some more information about this. You should be aware that there was a group of people called the Amorites that were just ordinary folks, as near as I can tell. For example, they knew Abraham. This is Genesis 14:13. Then one who had escaped came and told Abraham the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol and the brother of Anar, and they were allies with Abram. So Abram knew about the Amorites. The question would be, were these giants that were in the Amorites or not? And I don't have an answer for you on that. I don't know if they were giants or not. Let's take a look at a little bit of history regarding the Amorites. This is a super good slide. So in Abraham's day, the Amorites were living in an area called Hazazon Tamar, and that's it right here. This is En-Gedi. This is an oasis. It's beautiful. I've been up there. There's a fountain, a waterfall, and a pool, and all kinds of cool stuff. And it's just to the northwest of the Dead Sea. And then the four eastern kings from Genesis 14:7, I did a movie on this a while ago, turned back and went to En-Mishpat. Now, En means spring, and so they're just saying that this is the spring of Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and attacked all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites, who dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. So Genesis 14:7, you can see this in 2 Chronicles 22, and I'm just telling you here that Hazazon Tamar equates with En-Gedi. So this is all of the territory that the Amorites had, and this is the Arnon River right here. So their territory spread north of the Arnon River, clear to Mount Hermon, which I think is fascinating because that's where the Watchers fell to, and then down here into Hebron, Jerusalem, Lachish, En-Gedi. They had a lot of territory that they were involved with. Now, where we get some clarification on the Amorites is out of Amos 2, 9, and 10. Yet it was I, God, who destroyed the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of cedars, and he was as strong as oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit above and his roots beneath. Also it was I who brought you up from the land of Egypt and led you 40 years through the wilderness to possess the land of the Amorite. Now there's two things I want you to know about here. First of all, they're using this word Amorite as singular, but it is what's called a collective singular, to be like us saying the American is inventing, meaning all Americans are inventive, or the wolf is endangered, meaning all wolves are endangered. That we can see here that this is saying that these Amorites their height was the height of cedars. Now you have two approaches that you can take regarding this scripture. You could go with a literal hermeneutic, which is my choice. What a literal hermeneutic means is that unless it's clearly interpreted somewhere else in Scripture and it's given to us as an interpretation, we are not allowed to take it metaphorically or allegorically. Although I will tell you that as you go out and you study these topics, you're going to see people that say, oh, well, this is clearly metaphorical, that they couldn't have been as high as cedars. I'm here to say I'm not so sure about that. I think truth is stranger than fiction quite often. So how tall are cedar trees? Well, in Amos 2:9, we're told that the height of the Amorites was as tall as the cedar trees. Cedar tree can grow anywhere from 40 feet to 150 feet tall with a trunk diameter of 7.5 to 10 feet. Some theologians say this verse is not to be taken literally. I do not subscribe to that. I subscribe to a literal hermeneutic that when they say that it is shouldn't be taken literally, this violates a strict hermeneutic, because there's no scriptural proof anywhere that says that this verse should be taken metaphorically, symbolically, or anecdotally. Therefore, I'm left with no choice but to take it literally. The Amorites were as tall as cedar trees. Now God, I guess I could say God has a sense of humor, or God enjoys testing his people. So the land, the Hebrews go 40 years through the wilderness, and they were complaining and all this kind of stuff. And they finally get there, and God says, send 12 people to go spy out the land. So it was Joshua, Caleb, and 10 others. Go spy out the land and tell us what you see. Now God knew that these giants were in that land. So this is really interesting to me, because I think he's probably saying, well, I'm going to see what kind of metal they're made of. Will they actually go and attack these people? Will they trust me to take care of these giants? So here's the scripture. This is Numbers 13. Moses sent 12 spies into this promised land to check it out. Of the 12, 10 returned with a bad report. Joshua and Caleb did not. I love Caleb. He's a great guy because he believed God, and he believed that God would give them the land he had promised. Nevertheless, the people in the land are strong. The cities are fortified, and they are very large. Moreover, he saw the descendants of Anak there. So now we have a new name, Anak. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell on the mountain. Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan. Now there's a lot of dialogue about, well, are these people Nephilim or not? We know that the Amalekites were. We know that the Amorites, some of the Amorites at least, were. The question is still out there. Were the Canaanites Nephilim? Were the Jebusites? Were the Hittites? That's sort of an idea. You could subscribe to them all being Nephilim, and I wouldn't really probably argue with you. But you'll have to do a lot of research to find out if this really is the case or not. This is some fairly deeply embedded stuff. We know that there are 3 groups anyway, and the question would be, are these others Nephilim? But the point here is that Joshua and Caleb and the 10 others went into this land. They saw these giants. They freaked out. They're like, we can't do this. So this is a continuation. This is Numbers 13, 32, and 33. This is the story of when God told Moses to order all the men who were heads of the children of Israel to spy out the land of Canaan. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is the land that devours its inhabitants. Now that's got to be something we pay attention to, because this is new information, and all the people who he saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants. These are the descendants of Anak. They came from giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight. So as we were in their sight. I think this is probably pretty accurate, this drawing. This giant's very big, and I guess it would be a relatively big grasshopper. But that is roughly equivalent, it seems to me, what they must have looked like when they were spying out these giants. It had to be a very frightful thing. Now we know that the giants were cannibals, and I'm going to haul out one more ancient church father here. His name was Eusebius. This comes out of History, Book 1, Chapter 2, Section 19. They thought neither of city or state, and we're talking about the giants here, neither of arts nor sciences. They were ignorant even of the name of the laws and of justice, of virtue and of philosophy. As nomads, they passed their lives in the deserts, like wild and fierce beasts, destroying by an excess of voluntary wickedness. I love that phrase. By an excess of voluntary wickedness. Seems like we have a little bit of that going on today, doesn't it? The natural reason of man and the seeds of thought and the culture implanted in the human soul. They gave themselves wholly over to all kinds of profanity, now seducing one another, and now slaying one another, now eating human flesh, and now daring to wage war with the gods. This is coming out of the Greek here and the Roman, and to undertake those battles of the giants celebrated by all, and now planning to fortify the earth against heaven. And in the madness of ungoverned pride, to prepare an attack upon the very God of all. And this reminds me of Satan, who fell and said, I will be like the Most High. So this is where they're getting their marching orders from, I would guess. Well, who on earth was Anak? So Anak was the son of a man named Arba. Now to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he gave a share among the children of Judah, according to the commandment of the Lord, to Joshua, namely Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron. So it's good to equate in your mind, when you hear Kiriath Arba, you're also equating that with Hebron, and Hebron still exists. It's still to the south of Jerusalem. The father of Anak. This is in Joshua 15:13. And Arba was a member of the Nephilim tribe called the Anakim, and this is where we get this from, Joshua 14:15. And the name of Hebron formerly was Kiriath Arba. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim, and then the land had rest from war. Now you should be aware that the Anakim are probably the most popular giants that are mentioned throughout the scriptures. Here's some for you. This is in Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, Shema, O Israel, you are to cross over the Jordan today and go in to dispossess nations greater and mightier than yourselves, cities great and fortified up to heaven. Now let's do a thought experiment here. God is literally telling these people, you are going to account nations that are greater, and of course we think filled with more individuals, but really the truth was that they were greater in terms of their stature, mightier than yourself. Yep, check that off. Their cities were great and fortified up to heaven. A people great and tall, the descendants of the Anakim, who you know and of whom you heard it said, who can stand before the descendants of Anak? Therefore understand today that the Lord your God is he who goes over before you as a consuming fire. He will destroy them and bring them down before you, so you shall drive them out and destroy them quickly, as the Lord has said to you. This sounds imposing, doesn't it? So you travel 40 years through the desert, and you get there, and you go up in there, and you see that these are enormous giants with fortified cities, and the Lord is telling you to kill them. And so only two individuals, Joshua and Caleb, said, well, heck yeah, let's go in and kill them. The others were like, yeah, not so much. We can't do that. But it's like Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. They went into the fire. Daniel went into the lion's den. They trusted the Lord. So the point here is, the Lord is saying, yeah, this looks ominous and terrible and awful, and these are wicked dudes. But I want you to go kill them. What would you do in that case? I honestly don't know what I would do. I would want to obey the Lord, but I would also have a lot of fear, I think. Now, there's another group you should be aware of. These are called the Emim. Where can we go up? Now, this is Deuteronomy 1:28. Where can we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying, the people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. Does this remind you of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel? I hope it does, because the whole focus here was always to raise up and to go beyond God. That's the idea. Satan said, I will be like the Most High. And so this whole thing is all about we're going to be better than God. Moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there. Evidently, the Emim were a race of giants akin to the Anakim, and this is where we get it. It's from Deuteronomy 2. The Emim had dwelt there in past times, a people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. They were also regarded as giants, like the Anakim, but the Moabites called them the Emim. So you can take this one of two ways. The Moabites were those that dwelled in Moab, which is southeast of Jerusalem in the desert country there. So we could say, well, the Moabites called them Emim, and they were really calling the Anakim the Emim, or these could be two different tribes. But Scripture does talk about both of them being on the earth in that day. Another group of giants that you might hear about are called the Zamzummim. That's quite a name, isn't it? You'll also hear it phrased Zumim. Another group of giants was called the Zamzummim. The Ammonites would be what we call modern-day Jordan today. So all I'm trying to tell you here is that when you're reading in the Scripture here, they're talking about the Ammonites, and we know that Ammon is in Jordan. And this is Deuteronomy 2 again, and 10 and 11 and 20 and 21. That was also regarded as the land of the giants. The giants formerly dwelt there, but the Ammonites called them Zamzummim, a people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. So now we have a separation of these tribes. So the Zamzummim was one tribe, the Anakim was another. I would submit to you that the Emim was another. But the Lord destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place. Now Joshua directly referenced the Anakim. This is in Joshua 11:22. None of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. They remained only in Gaza, Gath, and in Ashdod. So he directly mentions the Anakim here. Caleb was not afraid. This man was 80 years old when he went in and took the land that he was entitled to. And this comes from Joshua 14. Now therefore give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke in that day. For you heard in that day how the Anakim were there, and that the cities were great and fortified. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall be able to drive them out as the Lord has said. I love that attitude. May I have that attitude. May you have that attitude. That is super good. This man trusted God. God said, go and drive him out. He's like, okay, I'm going to go do that. It might be that the Lord will be with me. Now, we talked about this before, the post-flood Nephilim and their subgroups. These are they're called the Rephaim. This is where we're getting the term Rephaim from. When you hear the term Rephaim, what we're thinking about is giants that were on the earth that belong in three subgroups, and there potentially were more, although it's difficult to find corroborating evidence that some of the other ites, as it were giant tribes. But anyway, we know that these three subgroups were giants, and they were called the Rephaim. They were the Emim, the Zamzummim, and the Anakim. Rephaim is also a word used for the dead. It literally means ghosts of the dead. It can mean shades, or it means spirits. And this is from Isaiah 26:19, which we read before. Also Isaiah 14:9 and 19. Your dead shall live. This is Mot. Together with my body they shall arise, awake and sing. For your dew is like the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead, Rephaim. And I'm fascinated by that phrase, your dew is like the dew of herbs. That's very interesting to me. That would be something that I would focus in on and go exegete once I saw that, because I get so curious about that phrase. So we still haven't answered the question. How did the Nephilim wind up on the earth after the flood? Now this is very interesting to me. Exactly how did the Nephilim survive the great flood and begin walking on the earth again? The answer is found in Deuteronomy. So this is Deuteronomy 3:11. For only Og, the king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Indeed, his bedstead was an iron bedstead. Is it not in Rabbah of the people of Ammon? So Ammon again comes up. 9 cubits is its length, and 4 cubits its width, according to the standard cubit. You can think of a cubit as roughly 18 inches-ish. The cubit varied depending upon whether it was an Egyptian cubit or a Hebrew cubit or whatever, but it's roughly 18 inches. Now, what I like about this is the ancient Jewish scholars corroborate this. So this is found in the Kihot Shamash commentary on Genesis 7:23. God obliterated every being that had been on the face of the earth, including humans, walking animals, crawling creatures, and the birds that fly in the sky. Note that he omits the sea creatures or the fish. That's interesting to me. They were obliterated from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark were survived and were greatly pained by their isolation. I can't imagine. However, one of the descendants of the giants, Semjaza and Azazel, was named Og, and he survived the flood water, and he reestablished the race of supernatural giants who became known as Rephaim and settled in Bashan. Now this is very interesting, the idea of Bashan here. So what we're saying here is the Jews believe, this is ancient stuff, these commentaries, the Jews believe that Og survived the flood somehow, and he wound up on the earth after the flood. There are other theories about it. Some people have the theory that maybe one of the wives on board the ship had some Nephilim DNA. And that's not likely because God chose all of those people because they were righteous. So that doesn't really hold water, no pun intended. But maybe that's the case. Or there are other theories, but I like this theory the best, that Og somehow survived, made it through the flood, and wound up reprocreating the race, as it were. Now, Bashan is very interesting, and I would submit to you, I'm going to put a link below in the show notes for you where you can go read about this some more. There are people that believe Jesus was baptized in Bashan. And that is very, very interesting to me because it says, Jesus is saying, I knew you were here. You giants were here. Og, you were here in Bashan, and I'm choosing to be baptized here because ultimately I'm going to wipe you all out. Now, has he wiped them all out yet? Personally, I don't think so, and that's the focus of the next movie. So here's where we're going with the next movie. But this is Matthew 24:37 through 39. This is the Olivet Discourse. This is a picture of the Mount of Olives. There are some 1,000-year-old olive trees on this mount. It's just absolutely a beautiful place. But as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until that day that Noah entered the ark. Now, what this isn't telling you, what Jesus isn't saying here, is he isn't going into detail about all of the evil wickedness that was going on the planet at the time that God made the decision to destroy the planet. That's not mentioned here, but you've got to keep that top of mind because this was a very, very serious, hardcore time. God didn't just willy-nilly decide to flood the earth and kill everybody on the earth. And they did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will be the coming of the Son of Man. So what we're told here, and this is very literal, as the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. So, and he gives you some stuff here. People today are eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and then boom, they wanted to get into the ark, but they couldn't because it was too late. But I would also submit to you that this means that the Nephilim are carried over into the last days as well, and so that'll be the theme of my next movie where I talk about what is going on in modern day today, what's going on in modernity. Are there Nephilim out there? How can we tell? What's happening? Well, now, if you like this movie, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. My channel is at Dr. Heldman ATR, that stands for Ancient Text Revealed. And if you would subscribe to it, if you would like it, if you would tell your friends about it, I am actively trying to grow the channel. And then if you want to comment, you're more than welcome to. I love getting comments from you all. Thank you so much for that. And I just want to tell you, Baruch Hashem, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Have a wonderful and great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.